Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon tank, and tonight I'm going to get in there and do some work. I'm at least going to do a water change, clean out the filter, and then from there I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm definitely going to get the glass wiped down, but will I get in there and really remove a lot of those plants? I don't know. I know I need to, but I just don't know if I feel up for all that tonight. But I do want to get this on video just in case I do get in there and make any kind of dramatic changes. I want to do a before and after type video. So I can say for sure we are going to do a fairly significant water change. So I'm going to reduce a lot of the tannins that are in the water. It is kind of dark and tannin stained, but we also have a huge reduction in light from floating plants. Once you actually look inside here, you can see that I've got duckweed growing across the surface. That blots out a lot of the light, but that only comes over to about here. Of course, once we get to the midsection of the tank, we've got all of this growing right here at the surface. That's the Java Windelov that grows right off that top of that piece of wood right there. And then, of course, once we get down to this end of the tank, we've got tiger lotus. So that's blocking all the light from penetrating the tank at this end. So it would be a fairly significantly bright tank if it wasn't for all of the plant cover blocking out so much of the light. Of course, we wouldn't have so much plant growth in there if I didn't have so much light shining down on it. But it's tit for tat. That's how it works. So again, I really need to get in there and just remove serious chunks of plant. I'm probably at least going to remove all this stuff that I can just grab and pull out of there by hand while I'm in there doing the water change. This is much more significant. That has been growing in there for years now, and that is all grown to the piece of wood. It's going to be really hard to, tease out different segments of the rhizome and thin that out and separate it without really just kind of destroying the whole mass of it in the sense of disturbing its growth and ripping it off of the wood. How I will reduce the size of this mass likewise without tearing it off of the wood and dislodging it, because it's a fairly tenuous attachment. It doesn't grab a hold of it and bore its roots down into the core of the wood. It's just kind of clinging to the surface, and it gets a pretty firm grasp on there. But I mean, you get in there and start yanking and tugging on it, and it's going to rip it right off of the face of that wood. I've done it on plenty of occasions, and usually I find the best thing to do is just say to heck with it, and just rip it off, cut it down to whatever size you want, and then try to reattach a small piece back in there, because that's all I want to do. Is I want to thin this out. I want to keep it all there. I just want water to be able to flow behind it. I know you can't really tell, but it really does go all the way up against that back glass, and then the root mass in the back goes down this way, and it really, really impedes the flow of water, because I do have the power head down here on this end, flowing the water that way, and it really does reduce the amount of water that flows through there. And likewise with this piece down here, all the same stuff applies, because there is a very large piece of wood right here that Java is attached to, and there's also some Anubias behind all this Java that grows up and is getting pretty large. So all in all, this tank really does need a lot of gardening. And again, I just don't know if I'm actually going to get in there and do all of that tonight, but I wanted to make sure I at least got all of it on video so that whenever I get in there and do it, we'll be able to see it. So I'm going to get started on the water change. We'll see what happens once I'm in there. So consider this part your before, and there's your after. So I did manage to get in there and get a lot of those plants out. Probably the most significant one was the Java Windelov right there in the middle. I did wind up doing exactly what I was afraid I was going to have to do, and that was more or less tear the entire chunk off. I was really unable to figure out a way to separate any of the rhizomes and leave some of them attached while removing a large portion of them. So what I wound up doing was tearing the whole thing off, taking a chunk of it, and then tucking it underneath of the piece of wood, because this piece of wood right here is just leaning on that rock. So I just lifted this up a little bit, tucked the rhizome under there, and then let the wood sit back down on top of it. But you can also see we've still got some roots and some little chunks attached to it. And then I've got this stuff growing there that I believe is subwassertang. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm probably pronouncing that terribly. But I think that's what that is. And that will get the opportunity to grow in a little more fully, if that's indeed what that is. And then, of course, you can see some of these stringy strands of roots and stuff were part of that big mass right there. So that was the most disastrous of all of the plant removal I did, and even that wasn't too terribly bad. This chunk here, I was able to remove quite a bit of it without really disturbing it too much. It's grown down, under, and through. So like this stuff coming up here is actually, the rhizomes are going everywhere. So some of the rhizomes had come through here and underneath, and I pulled them out and got them off of the glass to allow some more water flow. You can really see the flow of water through there now. You can see the roots are flowing in the current and everything. And I did the same thing in the back. We can't really tell from this angle. Might be able to see in from the end of the tank a little bit. Yeah, you can see how I've definitely opened up the back of the tank, and you can see a gap between where the plant ends and the glass is, whereas before that was all just right up against the glass and that water barely was able to flow through there at all. So I still do need to get in there and clear all the stuff that's collected on the power head. This is actually the following morning. I did all this last night, but it was still, when the lights went out last night, the tank was still so you know, full of detritus and stirred up and everything from the water change that I figured we would just wait till this morning and go ahead and do this. So I do need to get in there and get that cleaned out. I have noticed a couple of spots where the glass didn't get wiped down. I missed a few spots here and there, so I'll have to get in there and redo them next time I do a water change. You can see my Tenopoma down there is still not entirely happy. Part of that, I think, is he lost his buddy. And part of it is the tank is now so brightly lit, and all of the stress from the water change and everything last night. I think he's still a little freaked out by all that. So as we move down to this end of the tank, I did not really do much of anything with what was going on here. When we got to here, I did likewise very selectively pulled some rhizomes out and teased some lengths of rhizome out of there, and was able to separate them out without really disrupting the whole pile of everything. There was even some back here. You can see this is the bottom chunk of the rhizome from the Anubias. It goes all the way up and sticks out the other end way out here in the back, but this is the base of it all the way down here. And this Java was growing down and through and over all of that, so I was able to tease a lot of that out without disrupting the Anubias. I got that out of there, and then I trimmed all of the really thick, tall, you know, leggy growth off of my red tiger lotus here, and was able to get all of that opened up nicely. I didn't really gravel vac per se, but I did about a 50% water change, and all of the detritus and everything was all swirling around in the tank as I was doing it. So a lot of that just got drawn right out of the tank just via the water change. I didn't have to get in there and gravel vac necessarily specifically. This piece of wood, I talk about this sometimes, and now we've actually got access to seeing it. This is actually concave this way, and if you lift that up, or if you just go in from this end, I can actually take my gravel vac and stick the entire piece of plastic all the way down until it's completely underneath of here. So how much detritus and stuff is under there it's almost hard to get your head around. Even when I was just moving this a little bit while I was tugging on the Java fern here, you could just see clouds of the stuff just rolling out from the bottom. The same with these stones down here. If you lift them up and, you know, move them around, just like clouds of crud and everything come from underneath of them. So all of that was happening. All of that got swirled up into the water, and a lot of that got pulled out of here. I also did the big water change, big filter change, and put all new filter material and everything in there, so that helped clear the tank up. And honestly, the filter really didn't need that much work. I could have left it go, but I got in there and did it, and so it's always better to do it than to not do it. So I'm glad I was able to get in there and get that done. And I did all of this in less time than it took me to listen to ABBA Gold. We were only up to Gimme 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 when I was finishing up. So if you're not familiar with ABBA Gold, it's just a greatest hits album, and so we'll call it, what, 40 minutes, maybe 35, 40 minutes total. I was in here doing all this work, and we got all of that done. So on a final note, I will say, if anybody's interested in plants, I've got, these are the little pieces. me see if I can find the chunk of Java. See, I got stuff like this all day long, so if anybody's looking for Java fern, let me know. That is the chunk of Java Windelov that was in the center of this tank up here on that. So that is all basically one big mass. I could tease that apart, but I'm going to leave that intact if anybody's interested in that. I do have that. And then, of course, I've got just huge amounts of this Java Windelov. This is actually the part that was on the top. This is the crowning part. And then that is the part I tore a chunk off. And then I tore a chunk off of that to put right there. So all of that is the Java Windelov too. I'll sell that in one big mass as well. And then we've got, this is the big piece of Java fern that came out of there. And then I got more Java fern in there. So that's all this tank. This water change is all of what I got right there. And then I got plenty of it in the other room from other tanks and other water changes or whatever. So if you're interested in Java fern, water sprite, the Java Windelov, and the difference between the Windelov, you see how it has those sort of fingery, lacy tips? That's the Java Windelov, whereas the Java fern is just your standard Java fern. It gets about yay big and looks like that. So the Java Windelov is a little different, a little more interesting. So there you go. Check my email down below if you're interested in any plants. I've always got something available. So even if you're watching this video at some point in the future, you can still check my email down below and see what I've got available at the moment. So there you go, everybody. There's my 125 all nice and cleaned up, bright and open. So thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one.